Good morning. Hi, I'm Kelsey Hogenkamp, and I'm going to talk to you today about a theorist called, his name is Thomas Gordon. So let me share my screen with you. Okay. Um, Hopefully you can see that. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about Thomas Gordon. He was a theorist. Um, he was a psychologist. And just a little bit about him. He was born on March 11th, 1918. He lived to be 84. He died in 2002. Let's see, he got a bachelor's from DePaul Universities, his master's from Ohio State. He got a PhD from University of Chicago. He also worked as a faculty member there for 5 years, and that's where a lot of his work came out of, that he added to his model, that we see today. He also was in the Air Force for a few years. He's a clinical psychologist. He was married. He had two daughters, he has two grandchildren and three great grandchildren, even though he's no longer alive. His family still is. Some of his work was he wrote 9 books. He contributed over 50 published articles. He was the founder of Gordon Training International, the founder of what is most commonly known, which is what a lot of teachers work with, is the PET book that he wrote, and the founder known for the parent effectiveness training. This was one of the first skill-based models that parents were given, in that time. There really wasn't anything before that. And so this was a big deal when he came out with kind of this concept to help parents raise, um, effective children and do it successfully and give them tools to do that. So, and then out of that came teacher effectiveness training, because basically, what the parents got at home, now they wanted to see that being done in the schools. And so the teacher effectiveness training came out of the parent effectiveness training. All right. So Gordon's theory primarily focused on helping people resolve conflict through listening, communicating, understanding, taking ownership, and becoming self-reliant. It basically gave them a tool to deal with conflict using all of these things: listening, communicating, understanding. And he was most known for his I messages and the no lose conflict resolution, which we'll talk about. But those are what he's most famous for, and most what we can see in our classrooms is those two things: the I message and the no lose conflict resolution. Um, and a lot of that started from him helping leaders, um, basically deal through conflict, and that turned into giving parents something to deal through conflict and how to talk to your children. And then that turned into teachers giving them something to know how to talk to children and deal with children. So some of the first concepts we see, it was actually called group-centered training. This was the first name that he had given. This came from the title of a chapter that he wrote for his professor. His professor, I think his name was Carl Rogers, was writing a book and had asked him to contribute a chapter because he liked what he was creating in class. And so some of these first concepts, I'm not going to read all of them, but you can take a look here, was basically the ideas of that there's a participative group problem solving, that there needs to be, when there's a conflict, that it just doesn't land on one person. Everyone needs to work together to communicate their feelings, their ideas, and to work through them. Group-centered leaders need to set a model of attending to others by using reflection of feelings and meanings, or empathetic listening. And you'll see a lot of that in his model, where he wants the child to feel like they can share their emotions, be understood, and do what's called active listening, where you're asking questions and you're listening to better understand what the child is feeling and then figure out how to move forward. So we kind of see this progression, right? When he was a student, he started with these basic concepts for leaders. Now we see him as a faculty in the University of Chicago, and this is where he added the bulk of his theory. So a couple of those concepts are wisdom of the group. There's creative resources within the group that there's conflict in. Let's listen to that. Let's glean from that. There's a 4-step problem solving process that I would say is very helpful, especially in our classrooms. Number 1 is recognizing and defining the problem. What's going on here? What is the root of the issue that we're looking at? And then diagnosing the problem, and then making the decision, what needs to happen from here? How are we going to walk this out? And then how are we going to accept it and carry out the decision to the fullest? How are we going to follow through and give feedback? And then another concept is the leader's limits and group's area of freedom represented in a diagram. Basically, he just is compiling all this information of leaders in a corporation. Now he's translating into parents, and he's going through these problem solving processes to help people develop or to deal with conflict. And 2 more concepts that came out of this 5-year time period to his model was active listening and communication roadblocks. Active listening, I kind of mentioned, was basically talking about asking questions to better understand the other person's emotions and what they're feeling and what they're going through so that you can better understand and how to move forward. And then communication roadblocks is basically just learning how to active listen, learning how to understand, okay, there's environment factors that are coming into this. They might be tired, they might be telling me messages that I have to decode. And so kind of like that idea of there's going to be things you have to overcome in communicating that we have to figure out. And so he started offering, those type of skills through active listening. And so the next progression that we see in his theory is when he was creating the model in a course for parents in 1962. This is, again, what he's most famous for is those I messages. And basically, parents were coming to him in the classes and saying, what do we do when a child's behavior causes a problem? And one of his quotes was, well, that makes sense because in therapy, clients seldom cause their therapist a problem. And so nobody has really come up with a solution and how to deal with this therapeutically or the right way or the effective way. And so out of this questioning, he comes up with I messages. And basically what they are is a statement from a person with an unmet need. So for example, a you message would be, you're being a pest, stop that behavior, you're annoying, An I message would be, I am tired. What you're doing is distracting me, or what you're choosing to do right now is hard for me because I'm tired. And so it basically is using these I message phrases that instead of projecting blame and basically just bad feelings on the person, you're taking some of the responsibility and saying, this is how you are affecting me right now. How can we work together to solve this problem? And so one communicates, the I messages communicate fact. The other messages basically leave it up to the receiver to decode what's going on. So, saying you're a pest, stop. That person can say, well, I'm a bad person and I don't make good choices. When the other person probably was trying to say, I am tired. And if you say those I messages, that's clear, direct, the decoding is already there for the receiver instead of them having to try to figure out what you're trying to communicate. So those are what he's really famous for, and we see that a lot. That's the main thing out of his model is iMessage. And then we're going to talk about the no-lose conflict resolution. So he kind of talks about shifting gears and making those iMessage statements and using active listening to do so. Basically, he saw, okay, we need to make iMessage statements because that moves us away from you message statements. But now I need to teach parents how to active listening, which is asking questions, better understanding what the child is feeling, which moved him toward this concept, also known as Method 3, the no-lose conflict resolution. And he basically adapted this from John Dewey's 6-step problem-solving model. And you see it here. Number 1, define the problem. Number 2, determine the cause. Number 3, develop an alternative solution. Number 4, select a solution together. Number 5, implement the solution together. And 6, evaluate how that worked. How did the outcome worked? And so we kind of see from earlier his 4-step process in dealing with conflict, we see this now this kind of better evolved 6-step problem, which he very much adapted and added to. And one thing he added to it was called the behavior window. And this basically breaks down the concept of problem ownership. And this is what this is here. So you kind of see the whole purpose of this is to have ownership of the problem at hand, for people to take ownership. Basically understanding all actions have consequences. Is it, whose problem is it? Who needs to take ownership instead of blaming and placing blame? There needs to be what you see here, an area of acceptance. So child's hit in the face, playing catch, those two are area of acceptance where the child owns the problem, or playing catch, there is no problem. Area of unacceptance, throwing ball against the house. Child wants to play, parent worried about window. Throwing ball against the house means that's parent owns that problem because they're the ones that are worried about, breaking a window or something. But communicating, I want to play, but the parent is worried about the child. Now they're both owning the problem because they both have essentially stake in the situation. So that was one of his big models that he uses, diagrams that he uses to take ownership for the problem at hand. And so how do we apply this to our classroom? I think one of the biggest things is those iMessages, training ourselves as teachers and educators how to use it ourselves, but also model to our students. This is how I'm feeling. They even teach you this in like marriage counseling and just like in corporations. And so this is very much something we can use in the classroom is I'm feeling this way, or I'm having a hard time moving on with instruction because you are being because of the disruptions you're choosing to do, or something like that. I'm not an expert, but learning, rephrasing how to take, hey, we have a problem here. This isn't working. How you're acting is affecting me. How can we come to a solution and solve? How can I understand why you're making those decisions? And how can we help each other so that I can move forward with instruction and you can deal with what you're dealing with? How can I help you deal with that? And so it's basically working through that conflict. And when using iMessages in the classroom, one of the things Thomas Gordon says is it will provoke less resistance and defense. It will basically break down those walls, because when you make you statements, now if that's not what they're feeling and you decoded their message wrong, now they have to defend themselves and stand up for themselves. So using iMessages basically just says, we have a problem here. This is my problem. This is your problem. How can we solve it together? Instead of latching on that stuff that makes them feel bad about themselves with the you statements. And then in the classroom, maybe teaching and modeling the 6-step problem solving model. Like maybe this is a poster in our room. I think in the future, I would even use this when we have conflict, maybe with older students, not so much little students, we could break it down for them more. But having this available, they're going to have conflict with their peers. They're going to have conflict with us. So helping them, give them a tool of saying, what's the problem here? Why is this happening? What are some options of how to solve it? What do we agree to? And let's move forward. And I think that's an amazing tool for our classrooms in solving conflict and having something that's routine and having something that we teach our students and then we model and use in our classroom every day as a tool for how to handle conflict. I think that'd be really powerful. And then just to end here, there's some other things that Thomas Gordon recommends for teachers. Modify your classroom environment. Make it as kid-friendly as possible and functional and practical as possible so that there are less problems already. Just make that your baseline. Obviously, there's still going to be conflicts because every child has different needs, but at the very baseline, we can try to eliminate a lot of them when we're being intentional about our classroom environments and the students that we have this year as opposed to next year and so on. So the model for students and practice sharing emotions and being understood. Give them those examples of I messages and what that looks like. I am feeling frustrated. I am feeling angry because involve your students in the resolution process. Demonstrate it for them. Bring in other teachers to walk through an issue that they can see you do so that they know how to apply it to their own life when they deal with conflict, and make it part of your classroom atmosphere. Make it part of a way you deal with things together. And then that number one key thing that we're always talking about how to apply it is develop meaningful relationships with your students. This is always, everything we do is going to mean more when we take the time to develop an actual relationship with our students so that we're not just being a dictator or an authoritarian, but they actually want to receive from us and they know that we're for them because we've developed that relationship. So these are some more ways to incorporate that. And I think that's all I have. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments when you watch this. And I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed learning about Thomas Gordon. I think his model just had a lot to offer and was a great example for a starting point of how to deal with conflict. Thank you.